All right, everyone, we are live. Hello and welcome. If you've been hanging out for a little bit, hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well. If you've never been to a Gnomon art jam before, my name's Josh Herman. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of sculpting and then actually transitioning into Maya today. So I'm going to add this to the stream here in just a second, but I'm going to show you guys what we've been working on in the previous streams. So as you can see here, this is where we are in ZBrush. This is the character we've been working on. And this is a model. It is a quarantine beard. It's turning more into a quarantine mustache. I'll even look at this. Can you hear me? There we go. Welcome, everyone. So what we were doing last time was taking this model that we had here, or this concept from Bjorn Huri, and getting it to a place where we could, start sculpting or seeing, kind of seeing a good spot with it, right? So we kind of transitioned it, and we could continue sculpting this in ZBrush if we wanted to, but I think the best way to move forward would actually be for us to take it into Maya and start doing some poly modeling on it. So today we're going to kind of transition. We're going to focus probably just on a couple sections of it rather than all of it, but we'll get a good amount done, I think, today. So yeah, this is where we are. I'll load up from the previous tools as well, so you can see where we started in the stream before that. Which would have been here. So at the end of our first stream, we were here, and then we ended up going a little bit further to here. Click on this piece so it's all kind of the same. Here to here. And so now today is to get that a little bit further. Again, like I said, and we're going to transition into Maya. We're going to be doing some poly modeling. We're going to talk a little bit about retopology. We're going to talk a little bit about general modeling techniques and trying to get this thing. I'm going to try to move fast today and not do as much explanation on specific tools or techniques, but just generally modeling and trying to get it done as quick as possible. So I've already gotten it into Maya for us here, just exported it as a single large object. And that's, I think, going to be fine for us. I'm going to make a new layer as we get into this. So I'll take Hypershade graph. Get this over here, which is appearing on my other window. We'll make another Lambert shader probably. We'll just drag this onto this guy, and we'll make it like I usually make the base color underneath here a little green, so that we have something here. I'm going to make another one, which I'm going to make this blend. I like to make the specular color slightly blue, kind of a lighter-ish blue. And this is what we'll use for our retopology. ZModeler is a fine tool if you want to use it. I think it's a good choice. It's just different workflows. So I like to transition into different packages, and I treat it as a little bit of a different thing. So both are good. I'm going to name these. So this is going to be like OG mesh. And this will be new mesh. Okay. This, I'm going to put it on a new layer so I can hide this. I'm going to put this as a reference layer so I can't actually select it anymore. And then I'm going to go into my modeling toolkit. And I'm going to grab this and I'm just going to pull it off so we have it. At this point is always a good time to just save. If you've watched me work on this before, you'll know that I like to use quad draw. I do need to select the mesh to do that and hit this live little thing here, which means now I also can't select it. But when I hit quad draw, I can create these little points that I can use to create the mesh. I'm going to do this relatively quick. Make sure that my tablet is set up as well. I do use often a pen in Maya as well. My middle mouse is not wanting to work though, so I'm going to make sure this is working. One sec. That's why. If you're using a tablet, you can click and you want to work in Maya, just pretty quickly click this and go to middle click. You should be able to then continue to work in whatever software you want. So I'm going to quickly just draw out a square here. And I'm going to bring this all the way over here. Now that I've got a really large kind of swooping shape, I'm going to deselect it, select it again, and I'm going to go back into that hyper shade, which I had a hotkey up for it, which is now gone for some reason. And I'm going to give it this material. So right click and assign that. The reason that I'm doing that is so that I have this kind of more shiny material. You can kind of see there that there's a specular highlight there. So I'm going to continue doing this very fast. I'm only going to work on one side of the character. And today, like I said, it's not so much about, specifics of the technique of retop, but there's so many different ways to do retopology that it doesn't really, to me, matter what tool you use, whether you're using ZBrush, whether you're using Maya, whatever. It's just about, making sure that it's working, that you're working in a way that's quick and efficient for you. It's giving me issues, so I'm going to just kind of grab it. I'm not looking for, again, like I said, the perfect mesh every single time. I'm just trying to get the pieces in place so that I can model it. This is not my concept, for those of you who are asking. This is, maybe I'll get Quadro up. This is a character by Bjorn Huri, who is an awesome concept artist. I'm going to load it up for you real quick. There we go. I also don't really like this music, so we're going to change that. There we go. I'll do this one. So this is a character here for Bjorn Huri. I'm going to put this over here and just hide our outliner. We don't really need that much, and we can kind of put this here so we can have a good sense of it, and then we can continue working. All right, now let us continue. So just going to draw this stuff out as fast as I can. This is just kind of in the way that we were talking in the very, first ZBrush sessions with this character. This is only to establish the primary forms that we're going to need. This is not to, get anything final. I don't consider this a final model for quite a long time. And the way that I treat it is that you're going to be, if you're modeling this, what doesn't really matter what package you model it in. And again, I know I'll get a lot of Z-modeler questions, but it doesn't really matter what software you model this in, so do whatever one's comfortable for you. All right, that's going to be good enough for that piece. on this helmet. What I am trying to do when I do this early phase is kind of prepare the topology for later. So like if I know that there's a certain flow to the topology or something like that, that is something I do want to kind of set up. So I'm just gonna, you'll see what I'm doing is basically in a way remodeling this in a very simplistic manner. That's gonna take a little bit of time. Why do I retop the model before the model is finished? That's a good question. The reason I retop the model is for me, my workflow is that I just have far more control in a program like Maya when it comes to hard surface stuff. Now, if you're retopping a organic model, often that's because you're going to rig it. You know, if you're doing something for 3D print or illustration, you don't have to do that. So I'm going to take that. It's very simple. So I'm going to give you guys another example really shortly. Like we had done here, we had kind of gone from this model where we basically got all of the initial shapes. We had our concept and we took it and to ZBrush and we got, you know, all of the forms here, and then we expanded on those. So what I'm doing right now is basically taking it into Maya and getting something in this way where I'm getting the simpler forms. So the question from Twitch, which is saying, you know, if you're not concerned about final topology, then why are you doing this manually? Because I want to have the control that a model that's being subdivided will have. And to do that, I need to do it manually. You know, using a Z-remesher might work. Something like that is effective, obviously. But it's also going to, if you're trying to make a nicely quadded model that you would actually want to put on your portfolio, like on a demo reel, to say you're applying for a demo, like a modeling position, showing somebody a Z remeshed model and saying, you know, I'm a modeler, trust me, I can do this job, is a quick way to not get a job. That's why. So setting this up. If you guys have questions about things or the process that I'm going through, feel free to ask. Some of these things I could definitely, you know, hide or should hide. I'm gonna add a cut in here. Just putting those extra kind of things, you know. At what point of a sculpt do you retopologize in Maya? To me, that's a very difficult question to ask. It's kind of one of those, you know, at what point do you need to get to the final model? You know, if it's something where you're be doing production on it and, you know, your rigging team, your TD team really needs to get access to it early, you probably want to try to do it earlier rather than later. If you're doing it for 3D print, right, or illustration, never. All right, so this is a nice blockout for me for these pieces. Again, this is all just stuff to kind of get it going in the right zone. for things like this, we could bring in a cylinder and just kind of start here, or we can just do it individually. So am I going to retop and then finish the sculpt and project or something like that? I likely will not do any projection. I'll create a nice model, and then I'm going to come over into ZBrush and I might sculpt some details, but hard to say right now. It's getting in the way. Make a very simplistic. Again, this is almost like recreating a base mesh. And I think, a lot of people wonder why you would do this. Like, why are you spending the time to basically make a base mesh that you already had? And the reason is because you need to, whenever you're doing hard surface modeling, if you're going to do it polymodeling style, it's always easier to start with something that is like simpler, right? So if you start with something that's simpler, it's easier to control the edges and control the curves. Got some questions already asking, is it okay if we get triangles in this process? At this point, yes. I don't care about the topology right now. Even later, I personally am somebody who doesn't mind a couple triangles here and there, and I've heard that from other professional modelers as well. We did an event with Jay Machado, who is the Gnomon alum, who is the artist who modeled the Razor Crest spaceship, and he was saying, even on those models, you can have some triangles, and that's totally fine. Ingons, however, are a big no-no. So no ingons, but yes, triangles, especially if it's something that can be smoothed. Right, so I'm putting this in here to kind of create the top plane. I know that I've already kind of got, you can see here, there's this line that kind of goes up through, and I'll bring over in ZBrush as well, so we can kind of see what I'm actually aiming for, that there's this line that goes up and through these, and that's what I'm trying to plan out right now, is how the form is going to project through all this. And I know it seems very low poly right now, but if I just kind of take a quick pivot, I'll save. And if I hit 3, which will smooth this whole object, you kind of get a sense of where we're going. What I can do is quickly add in these lines, or a line there, and you'll see I can get that shape very quickly because I've planned out the topology based around the form of where the peaks and the valleys are going to be. It doesn't take me actually all that much time to add definition to the places that there should be, right? So if I come back in, I show this again. I can say, like, I know there's going to be another peak or something here. So I'm placing, as you'll kind of see this progress, you'll notice that I am placing these polys in a very specific way, even though it is seemingly simple, because it is. I'm kind of, that triangle I don't really care about. I'm mapping this out so that the future of my modeling is much, much, much easier. Probably want this to like end here, so I might even something like that. Oh. Weird focusing of the camera that I've never seen. I change the orientation. Weird. And similar mindset, so like now I can hide this, right? If I come in here and add now these, you'll be able to see kind of the same thing where I can get these lines very, very fast. Topology, topology is something that I think is easy to say. Some people care about it, some people don't care about it, and that's mostly going to be dependent on what they're working on. So, like, if you're talking about somebody like I see in the chat, like a Fausto is obviously amazing, but a lot of the work that Fausto is doing now is concept work, and so concept work doesn't go down the pipeline, right? It doesn't get rigged. It doesn't do what a production model is going to have to do. And so I think that's the really big difference that I see is the concept artists that you're seeing, things like Kitbash, things like whatever company or artist, their concerns are not about making a production model. Their concerns are about making a cool image. And that is a very different workflow than it is somebody in production. So to take what I'm attempting to do here is something that could kind of be both. It could be taken down production, but it also could be, I'm attempting to do it fast enough or quick enough that it could also be done for visual development work. Visual development work is basically where you are taking a concept that's been done and you're trying to create it as fast as possible to illustrate how it would work in 3D and that it can function, it can work in 3D. See, it's trying to get to that one. Sometimes they get like stuck inside the body, so you got to pull them out. Yeah, for right now, like I was kind of saying earlier, this is all just getting pieces in play. This is all just understanding the form. Just think of it like a very, if you want to you could use ZBrush and maybe as a starting point, right? You could use things as whatever you like, but this is just to get elements in play. This is setting up proportions, setting up base meshes to be modeled fully later. So you see I'm creating like a flow right here because I know I'm going to need to outline and create this shape. So this is an important distinction for me in the model. Sometimes I really do dislike this program though. It just won't do what you want it to do. There we go. Definitely can be frustrating. So I'm going to even just like map out this is where this should go. Right. So we've kind of got already this much, and this is a good starting point. It obviously doesn't seem like a ton. That's okay. We'll continue with this. These things I can model quickly, so I don't spend a lot of effort on them. Like here, I'll just make this one, delete the one I drew, and draw this all the way out there, just so it's there. When you're going to take something that is, from here to final, like if you're going to take this and model it in another program, just kind of setting things up will take a little bit of time. Polymodeling is definitely not dead. ZBrush is introducing a lot of really cool new things, and there's a lot that you can do. And I have no doubt that you could make this character, this project, in ZModeler. Absolutely, you could. No questions about that. But it's still, in my opinion, is not something that is ready for making production-ready models. I have no doubt that, you know, you'll watch this stream at some point if somebody watches it later, and ZBrush will have showed that I was wrong and that they can, or there's people who are using it for that way. That's probably my favorite thing about, I love Pixelogic. I think that they do amazing work, and they're always pushing the boundaries of what's coming up next, right? Whether it's Dynamesh, ZRemesh, simulations, like they're always doing things that, you know, you would say, you know, hard surface modeling, where you're like, oh, ZBrush can't do. And right now, I think that they're beginning to break into that. Demodeler is incredibly powerful for sure. And for certain pipelines, I'm sure that it is totally acceptable, right? If you only care, you know, I think there's probably a big difference as well. Like maybe if you're in games, the high poly that you make, right, only really needs to be a high poly often. It never really needs to be concerned about the topology, right? And that is a very different mindset than somebody who's modeling something for film. You know, if you're modeling something for a game though, and you're doing a high poly model, how are you getting it in game? Yes, I know Unreal 5 is coming out and people are saying that poly counts aren't going to matter, but how are you going to rig a 5 million, 25 million poly mesh? You have to remodel it. And riggers and TDs have very specific requests and needs of how a mesh should look. So I can tell you, you know, from my experience in games and my experience in film, that there's a very big difference between the high poly and the low poly. And you could probably make some nice low polys for games in ZModeler, but I think you would be shocked that there's still so many different tools and pipelines that exist, that there's still a need for that to model, to at least be able to output a final model from another program. At the very least, I think, you know, polymodeling is a skill you should know. One thing I would just generally say about, like, right, when you're doing this kind of art, is don't be confused with a new technique or a new tool in completely invalidating all of the previous tools, right? Unless it's a massive paradigm shift where everybody all of a sudden says, like, oh, this is now completely dead, you know. Just be careful about overwriting or saying that's saying, I see somebody in the chat saying, like, I gave up 3ds Max or something like that. That is, you gotta be careful with that, because those skills are still super valuable. You don't want to lose that. I was teaching a class yesterday, actually, and we ended up watching a little bit of a documentary on Phil Tippett. Who, if you don't know about Phil Tippett, you should pause the stream and go learn about Phil Tippett. But he's an absolute legend in the film industry, and he was one of the big guys who helped with Jurassic Park, and, you know, was basically trying to do stop motion. He was a huge stop motion guy, and at a certain point in his career with Jurassic Park, they were going to do all those in stop motion, and eventually ILM came in and said they could do all the dinosaurs, which he had been doing a lot of at the time in CG, and they ended up ended up obviously going that way instead of doing on stop motion for the longer shots. And he was like, my career's dead. My career's over, because he didn't really see how he would compete with digital. But eventually he ended up kind of being this huge visual effects supervisor and bringing all new skills to the table because of his experience in stop motion and in film. So just a little sort of mini story, just saying that just because you have a skill that feels like it's not as important, or it doesn't mean that it's gone. In some ways it can also give you experience that maybe other people have never had before. So write it off too quick. To me, this is also a nice change of pace, right? When you're in production, or you're in any type of a thing, even just like day-to-day art, right? You can it's so easy sometimes to just get caught up in like I'm in ZBrush every day, I'm sculpting every day, and that's fun. Absolutely, it's fun. But this is such a nice switch for my brain. Just kind of also thinking of it in that way, keeping yourself like moving and doing other things. All right, so like what I can do here is I'll come over here and I'll just extrude this and I'll slide it. So it's going to probably just stick to most of that. I don't have to do all of the stuff that we just saw, right? So I can still have that. And then we'll just make another piece here. I want it to be somewhat similar because I know that these are gonna ride together a little bit. We'll kind of talk about this in a minute. Like, some of these shapes are maybe not worth me spending a ton of time on right now, because I'm gonna model them, and what I'm going to use this underlying mesh for is actually almost more of a reference in some ways of what the shape should look like. I could have taken, I think total time that we've spent on this character is between 2 streams, so that's going to be about 6 hours to go from concept here on the left to at the end of 3 hours to blockout, right? To this. We've taken about 6 hours to do this transition. And so now to get it to this point, I could have spent 100 hours on taking this to a much more final level in ZBrush, or polymodeling it there in ZModeler, and that would have also been fine. There's not really one way to work. After we get done with this, which should probably take another 15, maybe 30 minutes, we'll start doing actual polymodeling on the objects themselves. And I'll give you guys, in case you've never done that, just some general polymodeling tips that I use. Things to look out for. Just general hard surface theory as well. I get a lot of questions about hard surface modeling from a lot of the projects I've worked on. So we'll kind of go over some of that. We're going to just overwrite this poly, even though it probably stick through. Oh, nope. I'm not trying to like quickly speed through this. I obviously want to go quick. I don't want to waste too much time. I want to be efficient, but I also don't want to just throw up a mesh here just because. Something that I, in my career, have tried to be somewhat conscious of is, over time, attempting to eliminate mistakes, meaning be more intentional. If you think of it like line work, right? Like line work as an artist or something, trying to be more intentional with my line work, be more intentional with the choices that I make. And I've found that even though it feels sometimes like you're going slower, you're actually going faster because you don't have to go over the same thing over and over and over and over, right? So quick example is, let's say I come in here and I take a sphere, and we'll hide this guy for a sec. Tool, polysphere, this will be fine. I want to start sculpting, and I want to sculpt the face, right? So if I come in here, I'm like, okay, I know that there's eyes, and I'm going to try to make this nose, and I'm going to stretch this face out as fast as like if I try to do this as fast as I possibly can, I'm sure I'll get something, and eventually I'll get there. But I'm being so hasty with my motions and my move of just trying to get to the end result, right? That I'm probably going to be fine, but I'm having to also now will have to correct so many of these issues. Like you can start to see something appearing here, but because I'm more concerned about the speed of the process, what I'm not doing is, I'll just duplicate this, I guess. Clone is coming in and saying, okay, what am I making? Right, I want to make a face. Yes, that's fine. Right, this is the proportion of the face. This is where the jaw should be. Okay, we'll make the eyes will be somewhere in here. This is where the nose will be. This is where the mouth should be. Great. Here's the eyes. Here's the nose. And slowly, even though it feels like this is a slower process and it doesn't necessarily seem like I'm moving fast, just because it's a little slower doesn't mean it's not as effective or even faster in the long run. So I can come in here and much actually faster because I'm being more intentional with the choices that I'm making. Make something that is effective and fast. Whereas this is equal time or less, right? What I spent here. This looks terrible compared to this immediately. So I don't think speed is necessarily a requirement in what some people think it is, meaning that speed is the actual physical speed at which you move. Speed is a requirement in the industry to meet deadlines, and there are certain, speeds that are, probably kind of required, I guess you could say. Like, you're only going to be given so much time to create a project, or to work on an asset, or to do something like that. But that doesn't mean you have to be physically, moving as fast as you can and drawing as fast as you can, and it's just a different mindset. Being more conscious with your choices of what you're doing will very likely give you a better result, and you'll end up moving faster. Okay. So we'll put like one here and one here. That though, I'm just going to get all this. So kind of the same thing here. I'm choosing to work smarter, right? Instead of going each individual square at a time, I'm deciding, all right, it's smarter for me to be intentional with where all these choices are. And then now I can come in and say, I need a little bit more here. I need a little bit more here. I need a little more here. I need a little more there. Maybe those. Let's see some comment in the chat. Maybe those time lapses confuse me. I thought those characters were made in a matter of 2 or 3 hours, one day at maximum. No, I mean, if you talk to, I mean, you can go look at Rafael Grassetti does a lot of streams. He's probably one of the fastest free artists I know. Him or James Vandenbogart is also incredibly fast. I know some who are incredibly fast, and they can do a great sculpt in a day or 2 days. But if you look at Raf's stream, or have a chance to talk to him or ask him a question on chat, like how long did it take to make Kratos? How long did it take to make many of the characters for God of War? You'll hear months, right? Sometimes, working at Cloud Imperium, working at Naughty Dog, it was, you would get, 4 to 6 weeks on a character at a minimum. Very rare that you'll get, less than 2 weeks to work on a character, especially if it's on a bigger AAA style, high quality game. Yeah, see, I'm seeing in the chat somebody saying at Disney you're allotted 2 to 3 months for final models. So, and a lot of that I think is what people don't understand about modeling as a position, and that's not the critiques, but the questions we're getting a lot of today is, why are you poly modeling? Why aren't you doing this in ZBrush? And that's because this portion that we're doing right now is such a small, or what we were doing in ZBrush is such a small part of the overall process of making a character for a big project. It's the funnest part. It's definitely, the sexiest part of making a character, where you get to make the art part of it, right? What it's actually going to look like, but it is not even close to the entire scope of what you have to do on a character. So we've got a good block out here. What I can do, I'll save this again. I'm going to save another version in a second. So you can use the mesh. I think it's mesh mirror. Edit mesh. It's in here somewhere. Mirror. And we could click this. And what you can do is now you can go and apply, right? And this will kind of give you where your mirror is going to happen. This is much like the 3ds Max modifier stack. So wherever you want it to go. I don't particularly love this, so I use a bit of a older school delete all by type, and I'm also going to create some other things. Show all. I don't like this as much because I can't edit it, and so it's kind of a harder one to use for me. So what I end up doing is I actually go and I group the whole object. A little dirtier the way that I do this, but you'll kind of see what I do. I'm going to edit, duplicate special. I'm going to click this object options. I'm going to make it an instance, and I'm going to make it a -1 in the Y scale. And I'm going to apply this. That's not the Y, that's the wrong one. So undo that. -1. There it is. What this does is it creates a group, and it mirrors the whole object, but because it's the group, I can actually move the group and it separates it, and this treats it, what I don't like about the mirror function in Maya is that it's not really editable, which is like 3ds Max's modifier stack where you can move it. The other thing that it doesn't really do is it doesn't keep it as a, when I actually modify the individual mesh, for example. So let's say I take this and I add thing, you'll see now I'm actually able to almost treat it more like it's a mirrored thing where one side is moving and the other isn't. So I like to do this. It is something I do have to clean up later, and it does take a little bit longer for me in the future. But what you can see is we've already got a really nice block out here. I should probably go in and just wrap up the back very quickly so I can kind of be done with that. Interesting. Chosen the other side, however, which is odd. You can see it's like not happy with what I did. I'm going to undo all that stuff real quick, just so I can wrap the back of this up. Something going on here. Maybe it was the group that I created. Do I know James Schaff? I sure do. James is an amazing dude. I went to school with him at Gnomon probably a decade ago. He's really great. Awesome guy, talented artist, really kind. Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, James is great. He's a great modeler, great teacher. So if you get a chance, it sounds like you're obviously taking some private mentoring from him. Keep that up. He's really good. He really cares about his students too. Is probably the number one thing you want to hear or see in a teacher. Just quickly adding these little pieces here, just so that the model itself doesn't feel like kind of empty. The hands, I'll work on the hands later. That's not incredibly important to me. The back of the concept was not drawn. As far as I was aware, I didn't ask Bjorn if I could use his concept. I maybe should have, but pretty cool stuff. So let's cover this up. So just drawing this very quickly so that I have stuff here, and then we'll continue with the actual modeling part of it. I don't really consider this modeling right now. I just consider this part almost like a setup phase. This can be textured on stream when it's finished. I don't know. I haven't really decided. My goal was more just to, we're trying to do something for the rest of the month with one consistent project. We might not have a stream next week because of Thanksgiving. So just trying to get this model as far as we can. So now that I have this, I'm going to take and assign the new mesh material, which feels like it's slightly off. So I'm going to go into our Windows rendering editor, Hypershade, select this. I like to work in a material similar to like matte caps or things, right? That's a little darker than normal. And then I use a little bit more specular highlight, and I'm going to saturate this saturation a little higher. What I like to do this for is to be able to see when we get into this now, areas of the model that are looking good or have pinches, or it just gives me a more accurate representation of what the actual surface is going to be. And when I rotate around, you can see that. This is one big piece of recommendation or advice or tip that I have for people who are going to do polymodeling or are interested in polymodeling, is to work in a material that has a reflection to it or a specularity to it. If you come in here and you assign, an existing material, Lambert 1, for example, that doesn't really exist. You can see, obviously, the surface, but you can't really see the real curvature, right? And that's something, as somebody who's doing hard surface modeling, I want to know where the highlights are gathering, right? Just like we're seeing here in the concept, where the highlights are gathering on certain areas. That's an incredibly important part to hard surface modeling. All right. All right, so what I can do now is I'm actually just going to take this mesh and I'm going to go mesh separate. It's just going to take all these to make them different pieces. I got a quick question from YouTube, which is saying, what are the benefits of polymodeling as opposed to sculpting? They're very different. They're almost entirely different. Polymodeling, sculpting, you'll be able to create poor level detail, especially in organic forms, right? It's much more easy to create certain types of shapes, right? So, you know, these types of details and things that we see here are going to be easier to make in a sculpting app. In something like Maya, the edge control I find to be far easier. You know, and we'll get into that actually here in a second. So one of the first things we're going to focus on is this helmet and these shoulder pads. So I'm going to turn off the live surface because we don't actually need that anymore. And we're going to kind of come over here and turn this on. Visible. So we have this, and this is now a template that we're going to model on top of. Right, so I'm going to take this piece here. I know that I actually don't need this to be connected to the rest of it. So I'm going to select all this. I've got it all. I'm going to go mesh extract, which is now not here. It's probably under edit mesh extract. So now those are two separate meshes as well. We're going to just focus on this. I'm going to save. We're going to begin breaking apart the shoulder pad and actually modeling the shoulder pad. Let's see. Just wondering what exactly is happening. Is this retopologizing the model? Not sure if I spell it right. Yes, retopologizing is something that we're kind of doing, but we're using this more as a template to model on top of. The reason that I do it that way is ZBrush is far easier to understand and create shapes and forms and flows and rhythms and all that kind of stuff that are really important to the art side of sculpture. Whereas that is very difficult, or can be very difficult to do in a polymodeling application because it's a little more technical and it's a little harder to do that. So my typical process now is that I would make something like this to understand what I actually need to make. Think of it like an underlay drawing. That's an easy way to think of it. Like you're going to do a pencil drawing and then maybe do an ink drawing and then you maybe do color on top of that. This is our pencil drawing right here. This is our ink drawing, and now we're going to go do a final drawing later. So it's kind of learning the process up. Question from YouTube is asking, when I worked on Iron Man armors, was it all modeled in hard surface, or was there some parts that you sculpted and then retopologized? They were almost entirely modeled, polymodeled. Some of them, especially as the forms became more organic, would start more in ZBrush, but they were almost entirely polymodeled. All right, so let's take this apart, and we're just going to start adding different parts of this to this character. So I'm going to take, for example, this. I'm going to rip this piece off. So I'm going to go into Edit Mesh. I'm going to extract that. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to have this as a separate piece, right? And even again, I'm going to do the same thing, kind of. We'll do it in a second, maybe, but I'm going to separate this even one more time. We have this line here. So I'm going to take like this, and I'm going to extrude this. I'm just going to move it backwards. Move this up so we can kind of see it. At this point, we're really just modeling. There's not a lot of actual technical things here. We're just going to be moving vertices into the right positions. This is obviously something we could do in Quadra if we wanted to, but the point of this now is no longer to just conform to the surface. Actually, we don't want to conform to the surface because the surface is lumpy and unrefined. So we're using it as a template to define a new shape. I'm going to start with this piece and then we'll make the piece underneath it. So I'm going to kind of curve this around. Come over here. You come in here. We'll bring in an edge. I'll reflow some of these so that I have a better edge. It's going to go underneath here. It's going to go underneath here. We'll just delete this, pull this around. So this is a piece that's going to sit underneath, right? So what I'm doing is really just beginning to adjust flow of what's going on. Let's kind of get this one up. I'm going to separate this, even though it's not really there. Okay, mesh, extract again. I'm going to hide, not hide, I'm just not going to select that. So now I have this one piece. And you can start to see what I'm doing, similar to what we did in the very, very, very beginning of Quadra, where I'm choosing peaks, right? So if we go back into ZBrush, I'm choosing these peaks to put my lines on, right? I'm going to do that now on the individual pieces of what we're doing. So if I go back here and I hit all, right, I'm going to start dragging each one of these around. I do use hotkeys in case anybody's wondering what buttons I'm pushing or what's happening. Feel free to ask and I'll try to answer. We're going to make this shoulder pad quite quickly, and I'll kind of give you guys the example of what we're going to be doing. So as I take these, what you see again is I'm picking these peaks, trying to align the surface to this. This one's really far in there. So this one. I'm actually going to have it slightly stick out of this. It's kind of a common thing that I'll do. Should we come back here? Hide this and just kind of tuck it underneath, tuck it underneath. Got a couple questions in the chat I'm going to try to cover real fast. When I'm retopping, I have deep cavities in my model, or your model gets janky, falls apart deep inside. How do I go about fixing it out, laying it properly? This kind of what we're doing now is, again, I'm not really using this. I think what a lot of people think of retopology as, and it can be this, right, if you're doing it for organics especially, is that you are like copying the model, and that's not really what I'm doing here, right? So I'm not copying the model. It's not what I'm doing at all. I am remodeling the model. And I think to a lot of people that sounds like a huge mistake, like I've wasted a bunch of time, but it's not, because now I actually know, you know, where everything should go, right? The process of modeling is far more technical, so it's a little harder. So I'm going to isolate just this piece, and you'll kind of see what we have right now. It doesn't look terribly impressive. I'm going to hit 3. You're going to see what we got. I'm going to hit save really fast. And then we're going to come in here. I'm going to just add in a couple things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to extrude the whole thing slightly as a thickness. This is an important thing because you're going to start understanding the scale of the object, and when you start doing this on everything, that'll be important. What it looks like is my mesh is inverted, so I'm going to go display properties and reverse. Now you get a little bit of this going on, right? And now what I'm going to do is just add an edge loop here. This is going to stop that from happening a little bit, and then I'm going to start adding some of these edges around here. Now I'm going to zoom in. Oh, that doesn't zoom in. Zoom enhance. Because this is the piece that we're working on. Okay, so we want to make this. You can see we've got the basic starts of the form here. I know that there is a large sweeping curve that's right here. So I'm going to add. Doesn't look like I did anything. That's okay. I'm going to do the same thing kind of here to stop that from bending so much. That means what I need to do is I need to add. First, I'll delete this one because you'll see what I mean in a second. But is there a delete button in here? No, delete. So modeling, settings, hotkey editor. There we go. I want to change my delete key. Just delete edges and vertices. It has as control. I'll make it Alt D. Save and close, so that now when I select this, Alt D, there's no vertices in there. There's no vertices in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add an edge. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to subtly, because we can see there's this sort of highlight here. I'm going to take it and we're just going to push it down a little bit. I'm going to do it to the front. If I push it down on the front, it's going to create the wrong shape. So I'm actually just going to select all these verts and I'm going to push them inwards. So it creates this little tiny dip. You can kind of see it now when I do this curve that highlight is gathering there. And now I can come in and add these holding edges one more time. And it's going to create that little form that we're trying to capture here. Now it's not capturing it as much as I was hoping. So I have to continue working on this a little bit more. And so what I'm going to do is actually we can show everything if we want. You know, I think that my original sculpt was close, but we probably need to take some of these forms and push them up a little bit. And so at this point, I'm actually going almost vert by vert. I'm going to adjust those individual shapes. Select this, all of these, just push it out a little bit so that it's a little less flat. Then even come in here, maybe put something here so that has a bit of a better shape to it. Creases, good question about creases. I'm not a fan of creases myself because I think that crease sets, even though I've seen them used really well, I struggle to use them because I just find them a little harder to control. So, no, I do not use them. I'm going to make a hotkey for the collapse button. The collapse tool that I use is collapse right here. We'll make that Alt E. Oh, that's my slide. I can't use that. Okay. Sure. I didn't kill my slide tool. Cool. So Alt A. We'll collapse those. Edge here. Looking pretty good. There's something that needs to have a more specific tone. Now you can see there's these sort of triangles on some of these. I don't have that right now, and that's definitely something I want. So we're going to need to add some of that in. Some of these are far sharper than others. So you can see if I wanted to, I could really quickly come in and just kind of say, okay, I know there's one here, I know there's one here, I know there's one here, and we could get this sort of look that it's starting to create, but that's not the actual look of what this is, so I want to be more precise than what this is giving me. Right now we're using Maya today. Come in here and let's say we're going to be like, go through here. I have a feeling that when I show this, this is going to stick out too far. Yep. So this is something you'll notice a lot in polymodeling, and this is why a lot of people don't like polymodeling, is that this object now is going to stick into another area, right? I'm going to have issues. What I can do is select this. I can hit B and push to the left. This is a soft select tool. So now I can move this whole piece inwards. A little easier. It won't destroy everything that I've already done. You want to end up creating these little peaks here. I think this line is starting to work, but we need to define this. So what I'll do is we'll just try to make one really quickly. Okay, and this is where this reflective surface is very important. So right now I'm just trying to make that shape. Maybe even something like this, just deleting that and bringing it back might be successful. So there's something for it to roll into. Soft select, I hold down B. Use the mouse or the, move your mouse around basically. I'm on a tablet, so. Let's get this one to be a little stronger. I don't want it to go all the way inside, so we're going to get rid of these parts. And I'm going to be creating a lot of indons at this point, and this is usually a no-no, right, especially for the final model. But what I'm doing is I'm kind of plotting out where things are going to look or live. I'm going to make like another thing, get rid of this, delete this, move this. This only along this edge, for example. So we can start to create shapes. This feels wrong, but I don't know if we'll see it. So just went black for a second. You're there. All right, good. So continuing with this. Hang on. Select is a super important tool when you're polymodeling for me because it's a way that I can push large objects without destroying everything I've done. Is key. So I'd kind of treat this at this point. I don't care, like I had said, about the topology. I still don't care about topology at this point. I'm mapping it out so it's easier to work on, but it's not like a primary concern of how I'm going to work on this project. And now getting the artistry, the mesh itself, to look the way that it should is the biggest concern. Okay, yeah. There's probably something in here that needs to be pushed. Not happy with this edge right now either, so we'll leave that for now. As a modeler, when you decide a detail needs to be modeled, or when you texture or bump map should handle it, that's tough. Often, you can decide that a little later. Also, is going to depend on your project, right? What the needs of your project are, etc. That's one piece that we've made. Now we obviously have a lot more to go, but I've kind of gotten this first element in, right? And it's not perfect. It's got some of the things that we want, but I can't, just like we would work, in ZBrush or any other application, I can't sit here and focus on the individual element, because if I do that, what's going to end up happening is it's going to look wrong, right? The individual element may look great, but I'm not playing into account the overall object, even though I already have a base mesh to work off of, so that I'm retopologizing or remodeling here. I still have to kind of come in and begin working on all these other pieces. So that's what we're going to do. Is now that we've got one, we're going to start working on the rest of them. I'm going to take this here. We're going to try to get everything up to this level really quickly. So let's work on this piece. I'm not going to make the gold piece here. That would be a separate mesh. I'm not going to make these red or the ring. That'll all be a separate mesh. So we'll hit all to see what we're working on. And this is, again, where we're going to start blocking out things. Now, I might have this up so that I can see, or I might start working in a minute with this wireframe on, so that I can see the layout of the previous other mesh, right? That could be important to me to know how to plot out my mesh so that it can have a flow that is, word, compatible. Previous one. So you see the difference between right now and what we were doing before. This is much more of a freestyle, where I'm modeling, but I'm not necessarily keeping it perfectly to surface. Let's take these, we'll work on them individually. It could be two surfaces, so we'll want to keep that in mind. I want to take, as I show all one more time, just a little bit to kind of make sure that it's in my mind that this should be. this in. One thing that you'll notice when you start adding in geometry is it adds it in perfect, right? It's perfectly flat. This can actually be really harmful to your model if you just start adding in geometry, because every time it's adding in very, very flat things. So I'll often bump it, which would meaning I'll just like take it and push it up in the direction of the curve. I don't usually want to like push it far or like just any direction, but I usually push it slightly in the direction of the way that it's going to be curving so that it can continue to catch the highlights. Otherwise, it creates these little planes and your model can kind of be just look flat. It won't look like you hoped for it to look. That's why you kind of see me sometimes coming in here and, you know, selecting edges and subtly just pushing them so that they get that little bit of curve that they should have naturally. Could you scale it along the normals? You could, like you're kind of doing a global scale, or just do a scale that's kind of just along normals. But I do that sometimes as a quick trick. But I find that especially on things that have a thickness, it can actually create these little divots that doesn't look quite like you would hope. I've tried that a bunch, and I've tried to find faster ways to do it, but it is a thing that just doesn't always work like you want. I forgot this thing has this little like divot here. So I want to get this shape. It's actually being created by what? It's like that. This is, I could say it's kind of rolling into that, I guess. We'll see how that looks. Kind of got about as much as I feel like I can probably do. Maybe this piece before I add thickness to it. This is kind of, you know, if you've watched the stream or seen how I work before, it's similar to how I work like in ZBrush, where it's like I'm going to try to keep the model as low as possible for as long as I can. The more subdivisions you begin adding, the more difficult the model is to handle. So now I'm going to take the whole model, extrude it. Probably going to need to do this, where we select it and display reverse. Now we've got these two pieces on top of each other. Push these slightly inward so that there's sort of a meaningful construction. Maintain that for just a little bit. We can start to see this. One of the things that you're seeing that I'm hoping that is working is I need to adjust it a little bit, but there's this consistent swoop that's going to come through, and I want it to make it look like it's going all the way through this. You can see this highlight running through, which is the point. How do I... Somebody's asking how you make 2D sprites. That is a good question, and I don't know the answer for that. How do you judge what the best place is to put insets / junctions? Are you talking topology wise? Somebody's asking when it comes to chain and thin ornamental details, how do you go about retopologizing them? I would probably just model them from scratch. Great. You see this like thing right here. Enhance. Right. this is a plane that kind of curves and goes up in both ways. And so that's going to happen right here. So I'm going to try to set that up. It's something we also have to do on some of these other ones that I haven't fully done yet. So we'll give it a shot on this one, though. So let's try adding this. Obviously creating some lines down here we don't need, so I'll delete them. And then we're going to add another one. We go all the way across. So we kind of get these highlights. We don't need them to run through this part. It seems like we almost don't want them to. So I'm kind of trying to not have that in there for now. And this is far too pointy. Seems like this might actually be swooping upwards rather than straight across. So we'll just reroute that. Again, I'm not super concerned about the triangles right now. In this one, so this is going to be this sort of one that's going to go all the way around. Again, we don't have the back. We don't have a concept for the back, so we're going to have to kind of make that up. But there's this very clear peak where almost these two pieces intersect. And that right now is not represented in the model. So we're going to have to do a little bit of work to kind of push this around. So when people ask, or the questions we've been getting of, why are you doing this in Maya? Why are you doing it this way? This is the reason for me, because I can get this kind of level of control and specificity that I struggle to get in ZBrush with ZModeler. And full disclosure, I'm not a ZModeler master, so there are probably people who could. So I'm trying to get this shape a little bit better. So don't want to lose. You see this large plane here and this kind of level of sharpness at the end, which is kind of going away. So we want to capture that back at some point. I know there's going to be an arc that's going to come through here. I'm kind of plotting out my topology right now. I'm thinking is it might be good to have something that comes in. And always, the inside doesn't always have to fit if it's not going to be seen. even though it might at some point kind of poke through, which I'll have to fix if it does that. This is going to give me a little more control, and I can start at this point to, start doing things like this. I can create a little more of a peak there. Easier for me to, and most people I think, to go into a model thinking art only, right? So we're just modeling this as if it's art only right now. And then all these little topology issues that I'm creating, we'll fix those later. Those are a very secondary concern. So because there's light here, and shadow in the middle, what that means to me is that there's probably some sort of a hollow. Right now, with the way that the geometry is set up, that's impossible to do because it's a flat plane. So what I have to do is come in here and add just a little bit of something that I can push in. Meaning, again, from a profile, that's a flat plane, so I need to come in and give it something that can be pushed. I'm only doing that, though, once I feel like I've got the overall shape kind of set. Pushing this only out on the normal or forward. Don't want to ruin the whole shape. This is where I think that this should maybe, it does look like it's kind of welded, which I think is interesting. So we'll have to figure that out. I do feel like this should be a little sharper. So we'll kind of start there. Kind of this like little secondary thing. So I'll slide that this way. So there's a lot of little things we can continue to tweak on this, and that's something I would continue to do. But I think overall we're getting sort of our shoulder shape. This area, to me, when I look at this, you'll see that the kind of area, the swoop is coming down and is starting to curl around, which is what I want. But it's continuing down here, which it does do, but it's not doing this little area. So I have that set up, but it's not being effective. And that means that the mesh is too flat. So I need to come in here. You'll see how it's not sticking out. It means I just need to push this probably out a little bit. That'll get that shape to happen. But I also need it to happen in this direction. So we're going to have to figure that out at a certain point because this is actually creating some problems. This is creating a nasty N-gon, which is making the shape better, as you can kind of see, but it isn't as a model, so that is something we'll want to address. What I'll do for now is I'll just make a little connection. Makes it so I can kind of control it for now.
I know about the drug. I know about all of it. Okay? I just need one.
Right. The topology is not great. Right. This is not what you want your final topology to look like, but the result is starting to work. Switch to a new playlist. We'll continue with the next piece. This is going to be one that's going to be a little larger, and we'll end up connecting to this. So we'll end up making this all one. So what we can do is just go mesh, combine, right? And we'll figure out how these connect. It seems like they should just go like this. We could also just bridge them. Now we've got these pieces, and as we continue, I would do or will do this basically for the entire model. Is I'm going to take the mesh that I made, which we kind of saw earlier, and we'll spend however long it takes to get a first quote unquote draft. Right, and this is a nicely topologized version of that. So what I'm going to do here is I kind of do the same. I'm not just copying the surface. I'm going to come in here and maybe see what the best way for me to make the actual surface would be. So come in and extrude this. Maybe figure out how this will work. The collapse tool would work on that. It did not. There's a lot of little detail that's going to go in here, so I'm just going to try to get the shape a little more refined before I continue building that. That this is stuck inside the body. So for this little piece, which can probably come way out here now. See that it comes down, and there's also this underlying shape. So it's things we want to keep in mind. Seeing how this is kind of swooping down, probably push this down. And then at that point, we kind of connect up where here. That's what this peak is. Okay. Pull this down. When you're doing the quad draw stuff, quad draw for me can often have a lot of issues where the meshes intersect, unless you do each individual piece separately. But that can often take a long time to do that. And I find that that can be a little bit of wasted time. So I just try to get to those base mesh, like I said, what we kind of did early. I try to get there very quickly, within 30 minutes to an hour, because it's not about what that base mesh is going to be. It's not how well I snap a model to the surface, but the final result of the model. So just something I try to do. How long have I been modeling? I have been modeling for probably 15 years now. Here's these three pieces. And we're going to do the exact same thing to this that we did to these other two, which is you can start to see the flow of the geometry. And what you can see is kind of these flows are matching or intending to match where the surface, where the highlight is. Got a little weird pinch in here that I don't really love, but we'll fix that in a little bit, meaning right now. It gets weird and it's harder to control. What I'll do is I'll just select these rings. I'll just collapse them all. maybe even just collapse this. You see that even though that makes it a kind of more awkward geometry when you look at it, the actual result is a little more successful. So let's continue with this piece. Zoom out just a tad. See, there's one large plane, kind of swoops down. We already kind of got that in there. Maybe add another piece in here. Maybe just put one here so that we can really add this in. Let's go up. Pull this in, pull this in. This all kind of feels like it's going like this to me, like it's kind of got an upswing to it. Only because I see all this having space and this being tighter. So there's something about that that means that maybe this should have its own arc. Add that in there to stop the geometry from going everywhere else. Just kind of push this down a little bit, just a little subtleness. Again, you kind of see what I was doing before, where I'm not trying to like make major adjustments to it, but it's just a little bit so that the reflections are more pretty. Way too inside. Reflections on a flat surface always look rough. They never look on a car, there's rarely ever a single flat surface. Truly flat surface, it's usually got a subtle curve to it so that the reflections will roll. That's an important bit when you're making pieces like this. I mean, like this area right here, a very straight line. It will probably be slightly more appealing if I just take this, very subtle, and push it like this. It's not a major change, but it's going to give it a little bit more. So let's extrude the whole thing like we've been doing. Give it some thickness. Come in here and mesh display, not display, and reverse this. We'll save it at this point. What's the difference between calling a mesh versus geometry versus topology? Mesh is the object, usually, I guess. Geometry can sometimes be interchangeable, I would say, for that term. And then topology is the actual way that the mesh or geometry is created, meaning how are the vertices and faces oriented on top of something. What books am I reading as of late? I don't really read. You're asking about topology guides. I don't really have any topology guides for you. Sorry. Drag this down. All right, this is kind of just to create, I'm adding that holding edge so that it gives a sharper edge to these points because these are very sharp in this concept right here. And I'm going to add some here to catch all these areas. I'm seeing that this line should continue off and kind of off, and right now mine doesn't really do that. So that means this should probably go down a little bit. And this might even need to go up a little bit. In doing so, some of this might also need to go up. this is where you just start adding the holding edges, which is something we've already done before. Often I'll come in and just delete my history. That's why I created that button up there, so it's easy to take that away. So add here, add here. You might want to come in at some point, and edge right now of this is very square. So come in, grab this, right? That'll create a different profile to the edge. This is something I see a lot, especially in beginner work, is where they'll create a nice shape, but just extruding the whole thickness of it will make it just feel like it's made out of like tin, or like you cookie cut it, right? Whereas if you come in and slightly pull out the bottom of one of these, and this isn't super representative of what's here, but it is a little bit. So pull it down just a little bit. Maybe even pull it over this way. And that gives it a different profile than what was already there. And it makes the shape feel more refined. Similar, it all right now has the same thickness, right? Because I can almost guarantee you that this would not. Come in here, just very slightly. I'll move it along this edge so that has a different thickness than the rest of it. And kind of taper that in. So that way you kind of get a more refined shape rather than what we had, which was just this really thick like chunk of metal. And if something is feeling like I was just seeing a little pinch here, we're just kind of pull that out. Often what you'll see me do is kind of go to a surface and I'll just orbit around. And what I'm doing when I'm orbiting around is I'm looking for imperfections in the surface. Additionally, what I'll do is I'll kind of come down and I'll look down this line and see if there's areas, especially smooth and unsmoothed, to see if there's areas that are sticking out or areas that are just not really working right. Continue this. We're going to add one here. See that there's sort of a peak here. That is, needs to get a little more curve in it, so we need to add yet another one. Sorry, just realizing I'm getting notifications. So this piece I think should be a little thinner. I'm going to select the whole thing. I already moved this one though. I'm going to slide it a little thinner. And I'm going to create what I did here. Just the holding edge for that. When it gets to this point, I don't want that because it's going to create this plane. So select it. When I create this, actually, it'll automatically select that sometimes. And so I'll just deselect I don't want. I'll delete it. And then I'll grab these edges. I'll just collapse them. We're kind of getting what we got here. It's not perfect right now, and there's some adjustments that I want to make. Similar, like I said, this is still sort of a first draft, right? We're just taking, even though I think we're making really good progress with this. Like we've spent an hour or so. It's a little under getting this character to have a couple of the really key elements of the character fleshed out, right? So now that we can take this, we'll maybe hide this. we'll see some of this parts are starting to come together, which is a good start. We would still want to take this, kind of push it around. So I'm actually just going to take this whole object, I'm going to duplicate the object, I'm going to move it down. I'm going to take all these faces, move, and delete. This is going to be this little under thing. I could obviously make it a whole nother mesh, but because I don't really have to see all that, I'm not going to spend the time doing that. So I'm going to modify center pivot. I'm going to make that a button. So I put it here. I know that I kind of want it to connect to this. Visually, it can't connect to it physically because it should be 2 layers behind, 3 layers, including this behind that. I do kind of need this to be like that. But visually, I'm going to let this extend all the way through here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to move it just slightly inside and down. Read all that. Just push it down a little bit. At this point, we can also show things. This is obviously something I already had kind of sculpted in here. So we can use this as a guideline if we want to. What you'll kind of see is this mesh that we sculpted as we progress is going to be more and more a reference mesh. It's more and more something that becomes a little less useful to us long term. Right, so now we've got a pretty decent start on these pieces. Right, this is starting to work. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab all this. Like I had said earlier, I'm going to group it and I'm going to duplicate special on it so that I have it mirrored. This is going to give me a good example of what it's going to look like. This way I can also move it and move things. If I find things, I can adjust it this way as well. I'm going to save at this point, and I'm going to, of course, going to save as a new scene. It is always a good idea to have iterations of your scenes, not just so you can go back and look at them, but also so you can continue to be safer with your work so that it doesn't crash. This is also important for me in this middle area because this has like this separation. Now I do have a mesh from here. If I show everything, right, I'll turn this off maybe. And I can select this. I'm going to just select off my thing. I have this. I'm going to go mesh. Sorry, it's under edit mesh now. Extract. This might take a minute. This might crash. So we'll see. It did not. Great. So we'll put this here. And I'm going to remove it from this. Remove selected. Seems like it's under a group. Duplicate it maybe. Move. Nope. Drag it out. Okay. So we're going to take this and we're going to make this a red color. And at this point, you can also start doing color coding. Oh, maybe make this. You can use your color picker as well. Red. Right click, assign red. go back into that window. Red seems to have much less specular, so I'm going to turn that down quite a bit. And this we can use as sort of a blocking as well. I'm going to take this. I'm going to start working on the helmet now. That, or we could continue on the chest piece, which will maybe just for now pull up some of these pieces. That feels a little more accurate. We'll do yellow as well later once we get into that. I'm going to keep this helmet as one piece for as long as I possibly can, and then I'll break it up. The reason I want to keep it for one piece as long as I can is because it's a really kind of simplish shape, right? And to keep it, to keep the forms consistent, and that the swoops between there will be more effective if I can break it up after I implement those. So what I'm going to do is we'll show everything again. Let's see what we got here. Right. Duplicate this. I'm going to just duplicate this piece so we have it visually. I'm going to hide. I'll do it to everything. It's not this piece. This piece will do the same too. Take these on the center line, scale them together. Weird camera was still there. All right, so we're getting there. This piece will probably be sculpted in later, so I'm going to use it just generally as like a reference piece, right? We're not going to use it as a Bible. There we go. So similar kind of thing. This was a challenging helmet from what I could tell earlier because it is simple but not at the same time. There's certain swoops on it that have been a little challenging for me to capture, so we're going to see how this goes. What I'm going to do is kind of lay out some of the things that I want to do. Obviously, right now, this is what we have, and it's a very simple shape. And so I'm going to kind of have this up, pull around. I'm going to block in this cheek line. Probably want at least one more than this. What I'm trying to avoid is that there's going to be a really harsh plane in this because it's pretty spherical or cylindrical. But what I don't want to do is like create a bunch of planes in here and try to block out all these shapes and then have this zoom out and say, oh, this looks awful now, right? So I'm trying to maintain that lower resolution so it's a little easier to work with. You can come in, I believe it's and add the smoothing angle or edge flow, which you'll see when it adds it actually tries to maintain the shape. That's not a bad feature. And in certain areas like this, it's something I might do. So that now there shouldn't be a single harsh plane in there, even though now there is additional. I try not to keep that on all the time. Cheek out. Slide this up. Put that in there. Delete. I don't want it to go to the bottom. I want it to go here. Kind of slide this up and down so that it kind of gets its own. And straighten it out. And there seems to be like one little area here. So it's just like here. Where that's actually connecting to. And the kind of goal right now is just to be able to lay all this stuff out, but add geometry that will be beneficial when I start actually carving in the details. So I see that there is a plane change here, it's almost Iron Man-ish, right? That's going to have an indentation, something that comes up and goes out. So I'm setting that up here where I can start to push in this piece. So like, let's say I just come in here and we'll start it. So we'll push in normals. Can hide this. I also slide it up at this point if it feels like it needs a little bit more space. So I'm moving base off of these edges so that it doesn't actually like adjust the program, the face too much. But it does need to keep going in, I think. So I'm going to push this inward. That is going to be here. This is where I can come and use the mesh as a reference again. So I've kind of mapped in this line, starting to map in where this should go. I think I was kind of off on this, so I'm using what I have now instead. This does seem like a good point for where that should end. All right, I think we got a decent point on this. All right, so now you can see when I add this line that those start appearing. So if I show everything and just hide this, we'll start to see a little bit of this appearing. It's too harsh what I just did, but you can see kind of what this groundwork that I'm laying, what the intention of that is. Question from YouTube is saying, what I think is the most important thing to keep in mind when doing a retoppo of a character that has this type of strange and weird shapes. Just trying to understand what this is, what makes this look cool. keeping the overall picture in mind is really important. Because you can pretty easily and quickly, you can retop a character fast, right? You can model a character fast, but it's not always going to still represent what the character was supposed to. Meaning, you're not, just because you can do it quickly doesn't mean you're actually achieving what the original vision of the character was. And so that's something I try to keep in mind quite a bit is, what is it that this is supposed to be looking like? What is this supposed to be doing? From the very beginning. I think that's just part of the process of where you're, if you're so close on this, right? If I'm zooming in and working at a vertex level, which is probably equivalent to working at pore level detail on an organic character, like the whole time, it can be really difficult to take a step back and say, what is your whole character actually looking like? What does your overall proportions look like? And this is kind of why the process of retopology was kind of invented in the first place. And it was so that you could use a program or an application that is more artist friendly, which I think most of us would agree that a program like ZBrush is more artist friendly. And that's kind of why it's there, right? Keeping that part of it in mind, that it should still be sculpturally healing, not just technically. Somebody just said they just jumped into 3D modeling. They're a concept artist and they're having some trouble with topology. I want to ask how to tackle that when they're stuck in topology and can't figure out the way. My biggest piece of advice for that is just think about the topology and only worry about what the final result looks like, especially if you're doing concept work. Even for early parts of a model or anything, to me, the topology is secondary. It's what the object looks like. So if you're able to make the object, whatever you're working on, look good with bad topology, and you're going to paint on it, or you're going to find some other way to get it to come across, that's okay. Right, I'm going to extrude this whole thing. We're going to push it in, and I'm just going to delete all these faces actually. And then I'm going to take the mesh, display, reverse. This more like a shell at this point. I don't need these ones because they're going to be mirrored, so I can delete these. I don't need these ones again because they're also going to be mirrored, so we can delete those. I'm going to use these top ones here in a minute, likely to just, we'll just see what that looks like, but we'll just collapse that. This one as well, maybe. Here's where we can put some of those lines, right? This is going to dictate that line. And then I kind of lost this one, which I didn't mean to. Just this one here. So I'm going to re-implement that. think I'm going to have to add another set of geometry here. And I'm sure this will create an issue with a pinch. You can kind of see it there where there's this is too flat for the rest of the arc. So I need to like come in here and just move this around just a little bit. This is creating a little weird divot here. Not what I wanted. Try moving it up. Do this down. Maybe this down, because this line should be coming a little further. What I'm going to do is something that I've done. We'll make this, we'll make a rendering thing. We'll go to Hypershade and we're going to duplicate our red one. Actually, we'll duplicate our this one. This will be our gold. And so at this point, we can just color pick the gold. Let's say it's like probably this one. And we'll change this color to be more in the gold range, so it kind of feels more gold. I'll hide this, and what I'm going to do is basically map out where the gold will go. So I'm going to show this. I'm going to hide this for a second. Okay, I got a thing that's going to go here. That's enough. I know that this is going to kind of go here. So this is going to make it, not really a good-looking mesh at all. But what it will do is it will give me sort of a way to like define parts of this character. And I'll be able to use this as a way to kind of color code some things. So what I mean is I can select these faces now. I know that it's going to basically run like this, and I'll make those gold. I'm having an issue with that for some reason. So we'll open up our Hypershade. We'll assign that there. This. So this is gold is bothering me, but we can start to see how this shape is going to work, and I can tell you right now that this does not look correct. So what we need to do is now that we kind of have this form, we can start adjusting it. So it looks to me like this should up a little. This area is not straight as it should be, so I can use the slide tool. There's a couple ways we could do this. We can either slide the edges of this, or we can kind of come in here and just say, okay. It looks like I just had this as the wrong color, actually. It's sticking too far, which is interesting. So I'm trying to figure out proportions, and this is where the difference between form and color and detail are really going to play in, because I have, a pretty obvious area that I can focus on, right? Like I know what this shape should look like. And I think some of this up here is working. Maybe I want to bring this up a little. I'm assigning it to the edge so that it can slide along the edges. I think the mask itself should actually be more further. And this is something that was, I could have maybe spent a little more time defining here, but I didn't really color this, right? I didn't come in here and color and see how this would work. I thought it was close, but now that I'm playing with it here, I'm seeing it's a little off. As far as the topology, it's not a concern at all for me right now. I'll fix that later. More about what the overall shape is, because again, the overall shape is more important than the rest of it. Taking a quick break from that to focus on this is going to be a challenging area. This is sort of retop, but this is more of a remodel. I'm trying to decide where this goes. I want to also implement this little gold strip, which I don't have right now. If I come in and just say this is probably where that gold would go. This side's gonna be all messed up, but it's not too bad. those little lumps I just created as well. A lot of little areas here to fix, but I think we're getting closer. This to me feels like it could go up a little. This distance almost feels like this. So using the color as a good way to block out the shapes. I'm going to try a couple of things and just kind of shove this around and push it back a little. It probably looks like I'm spending a lot of time on just the placement of this mask, and that's because I am. But it is an important element of the character. You know, heads and busts, and generally shoulders and up, tend to be the most commonly seen parts of a character. So you often spend far more on them, and sometimes they'll also have a lot more intricacy in them that is important to maintain. I think we're pretty close with this one, though. This distance feels a little too much. Enough. I think I still want to push this in. The challenge is that now this plane is too small. I feel like this is starting to get there. This isn't really getting there, and I think that that's because why? Why is that happening? Bring this up. I think that's okay. All right, let's just jump over to one of these really quick. I think we got a pretty good place for the head. We'll obviously be able to cut this apart and, you know, put all these little things in there. But I want to try to get a little bit more progress on some of the rest of the body in the half hour we have left. So again, this is sort of our first draft. We're going to take everything we got here and we're going to try to bring it in. I think that I'm missing some of the bulk maybe that was in previous parts. You can kind of see the difference when I smooth this, how it's actually inside of basically all of the previous size. Like if you can see this difference that's here. This is something I'll have to spend a little bit of time getting. It definitely feels like it's thinned out a little bit. Something to be aware of. I'm going to just drag this up. Make that. I don't know if we ever made a green. Yeah, we did make a Lambert one, so we can use that. And that'll be just fine. Drag this up. We'll make a new one. Let's see. Let's take the red one. Hate it. Green. It's more olive, isn't it? Cool. At this point, we can also, as you're seeing what I'm kind of doing, is I'm really just getting a little bit of what we were doing in ZBrush, which was just getting the final version of the character a little more represented. So it's not so much about trying to replicate everything about it. It's just getting a little more of this, and this helps us see the final version a little better. I'm going to take this, I'm just going to extrude this up. I know that's got to go in here somewhere. I also know that we have, these ones are, okay, cool, they are mirrored. I think all of these will be. Good. Take this and we'll just flare it out. We know that there's going to be something in here. I'm going to go to the front view on this. I'm going to just flatten this because you see that's a very flat line. So I can flatten that way. There's other ways I can do this if I want to do components, if I want to do world, if I want to do object. There's all these different ways we can do it. You could do it based on an axis, right? So we could do a custom one based on an edge. If I want to flatten it to an edge, which would be fine. I think it's kind of one of the better ones for us right now. And in this, we'll eventually want to do something where, we're going to have a little area like this that we're going to extrude in, create this sort of a form. I'm going to do this now. This is a very quick and easy version of this. It's not intending to be the final, but it is going to help me understand a little bit more about the character and where some of this stuff should go. So even in, what we have here, now, general, I know that right here is where I had plotted out these things. Do this again, select, access custom, set to edge. We'll use this one and we'll smash it there. I don't mind the little subtle angle to that. It actually feels kind of nice. And now I should actually be able to get some nice come in here. Let's make this gold. This isn't stuff that's super important right now to like the final version, but it is something that can help you, more quickly see the final iteration of the character. So when you start adjusting proportions, things like that, they're there already. I just delete this and bring it over to get that across. I'm going to grab these hands. Where is it? There it is. All right, so this way, I should be able to take this away. We'll put this, we'll put all of what we have here in a new layer, just so we have it called new. Like this, now that we have it, just so we don't have to spend a bunch of time modeling those hands right now. This will create like a nice clean area where this can all go. So kind of the same as we did above. This is, for me at least, a nice way to just, get things in a decent spot. Just toss this away. We're getting there. We're getting all these little starter pieces in, and I think this is going to be a decent first draft. We got about half an hour left in the stream. So what I'm going to do is kind of block out this overall central piece of the chest. And just take some of these elements here, and I'm just going to throw them up into the middle. So scale them, move them to the center. Just kind of prepping the rest of the model. Notice that even if I show, like I start moving pieces of the mesh, and before I do that, if I show that, I didn't, when I retopped it, I didn't put it all the way to the edges of this stuff, and that's so that I'm going to bring this to the edge, but it would have been very difficult for me to do that on retopping because where I actually want this to go doesn't exist. All right, so once I get something quote unquote completed with our first draft, I'll give it the colors. Like I didn't. I did. Okay. Okay, I think we're kind of getting there with some of this. This will be gold here. Is eventually going to connect with this piece here, so I'm going to try to mimic it. Flow of what everything else is going here. Connect this with this. So we're getting there, and this is going to be a more complicated piece. This is definitely going to be a slightly more complicated piece. What I want to do with this one is I'm going to open this up, and we're just going to take a look, I guess. We'll start on this. Bring up some of this. There's this top area here, which I'll probably first. you use Blender, is it hard to learn in your opinion? No, I don't think it's hard to learn if you use Blender. I think Blender is a really good tool, especially for people who are interested in learning 3D. I don't, it's obviously a free program, which is a huge benefit as far as cost. It's got a lot of resources out there. YouTube, tons of tutorials. It has its own pretty large subreddit, from what I'm aware. So I don't think it's a hard thing to learn, or it's a hard. It's got tons of resources, so no, I don't think it's difficult. What I'm doing now is totally. All I'm doing now is just something. It's using different buttons and maybe a couple different terms than what Blender's doing. You could do everything I'm doing right now in Blender quite easily. So I'm just spending a little time getting this shape here. So I now have an underlying shape, which is this part here, the silver part, and then I have this overwriting shape, which is this gold part. And now I'm using this sculpt that I did as the reference point for where this line's going to go. So I know there's going to be something that's going to go this way, basically. Probably just reroute most of what's here. Say that, to be a crease like that, there has to be a difference in plane. So I'm going to just take here. Just going to do this so it's extended all the way. And just subtly. You can do this a couple ways. You could extrude it. If I extrude it, I can push this out slightly. Some things you can do with this is now I have obviously a shelf here that I can push in and create that distance with. It also creates a nice line underneath for me to adjust. Start defining what that shape's going to be, and then I can delete all this stuff. Starting point for that. Still going to come in and smash it to the middle. All right, and then I'm going to take, there's a subtle plane change here that I've been, at least in ZBrush, I was trying to maintain. So I'm going to model this form as if the rib cage pieces are not actually pushed in. So it's just kind of this. And I think we're pretty close to that, so I'm pretty happy with where we are on this piece. I'm going to turn off my, here, select this edge, extrude the edge, and this is where I'm just going to globally scale it in, or from these two angles. I'm going to have to go into each one of these. As you see, parts of that didn't really do what I wanted. So instead of scaling it in like I said I would, I'm going to go back to my faces, extrude it, and use the scale this way first. Then I'm going to deselect these edges, bring them down. Try to be very careful whenever I'm extruding an edge to not, like, spend too much time or doing like a global operation, especially on a larger piece like this, because you'll just find that often doing one big move and then trying to fix it later will just hurt you. I'm doing this a couple times so that I can create a thickness and actually go upwards with it. This time I will do it a little bit. So do that. And that's going to give me this sort of large rounded edge here. I can probably take this whole thing and just make it gold. I don't really love the shape that this is making right now. I'm actually going to make one side of this silver. I find the silver a little easier on the eyes, so I don't always color code something if it's got quite a bold choice to it. So it's decided that I will only do the ones that are selected. This plane is not really existing like I was hoping for it to. So I'm going to need to do a little work here. So I'm just going to take this and separate it. Or I can adjust independently. Looking at this angle, trying to be conscious of that. I want this shape to come in, but I also need it to, in this profile, tuck in quite a ways. So that's something I'm going to try to see if I can kind of get a balance of both worlds. We'll leave that alone for now. Just playing with these. We got about 10 minutes left. So if anybody has any last questions, now's kind of your chance. Otherwise, we're going to start wrapping this up pretty soon. I'm going to do just very quickly. I think I did this intentionally. Let's see if I did. Sliding some things around. Let's see. So that would be this. Right. Kind of the same thing as we're just going to start bulking this out. And what I was saying is, what I often find is, even though I feel like the proportions are usually pretty good in the first, sculpts that I do, I end up doing a lot more adjustments after the fact than I usually expect. That can range to all different kinds of things. What do I do in Unreal Engine versus software? Are you talking about like texturing or modeling or? I think we're starting to get there. You can kind of start to see this coming across. Obviously, there's a lot of details we need to do. There's a lot more work we need to do. But I think we're at a good point where things are starting to extrusion, because I think that's a relatively straightforward one. I'll quickly just add some of these lines that I had blocked out here. I'm not going to do these legs down here, but I might be able to get something quick in there. I'm going to just extrude all these really poorly. Yeah, it did. I just didn't want to extrude the whole thing. Let's try it again. Going to take off. Is there a hardest art to master? I don't think so. Not that I can think of. Good question, though. They're all difficult. I mean, I think, yeah, it's each form is going to have its own difficulties. Not really one. I think that's harder than others. That in there for now. So we have some progress on all these pieces that we can kind of come back to. All right. Well, that is probably going to wrap up the stream for us today. Thank you guys all for joining. Pretty happy with the progress that we've made, especially considering we came into this with just, high-res sculpt. Right. So kind of going from this point where we have a really decent layout of where everything should be, kind of going. And I think that, now that we've gotten into Maya, we'll spend a lot more time breaking this down and getting into, some more finesse detail, but we've got a pretty solid starting point for all that, which I'm pretty happy with. As you might be able to see in the chat right now, we have a couple cool events coming up as well this week. So take a look at our channel both tomorrow and Friday. Tomorrow we'll have the VFX of Umbrella Academy Season 2. That'll be at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. And then also take a look on Friday. Sorry, I rolled over my headphones again. On Friday, we will have Bo Jansen, who's our VFX education lead. He'll be on talking about the cool new VFX BFA that we have. So we just announced a new track a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, to talk about all that stuff about the curriculum, a little bit about it, and we'll kind of go from there. So thank you everybody for joining today, and we might not have a stream next week due to Thanksgiving. So if not, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day.